Hi, my friend. You found my channel. Jackpot. If you're new here, press subscribe, share this video with your gang, and help me keep the good vibes flowing. I'd love to know, from what city or country are you watching? Every comment is pure gold to me. Let's jump right in. The second she walked in, I knew. 20 years of marriage had made her an open book to me, and that book was now inked in guilt. The cheap wine on her breath and a cologne that didn't belong to me clung to her like smoke. She didn't have to say a word. I kept cutting into my steak, rare enough to still twitch, pretending not to notice her frozen stance near the counter, arms folded like a barrier between us. The kitchen clock kept ticking, each sound louder than the last, like a metronome for judgment. That clock had been with us since day one, a wedding gift from her parents. Once white, now faded to a yellow hue, but still ticking with relentless precision. It had become the silent witness to our lives, constant, reliable, always present. A far cry from the woman glaring back at me now. "We need to talk," Rebecca finally said, her voice slicing through the silence. I didn't rush to respond. Instead, I cut another piece of steak and took my time chewing. She was supposed to be out with the girls tonight, yet another link in the growing chain of lies she thought I hadn't noticed. That steak had been seasoned not just with salt and pepper, but with weeks of building resentment. Back when we meant something, she used to cook for me. Now she could barely offer sincerity. I finally turned my eyes to her and spoke evenly. "Do we?" I asked. She slid into the chair beside mine, movements too graceful to be unplanned, her body language rehearsed. The silver necklace she wore, my anniversary gift, glimmered under the overhead light. I hadn't given it to her just for sentiment. She launched into a monologue about how we'd grown apart, how we needed freedom, growth, space. While her lips moved, her hand crept onto my thigh, familiar in motion, as if muscle memory could erase betrayal. I'd given her 20 years, decades of working swing shifts at the mill, breathing in metal dust, coming home too tired to stand some nights. I broke my back to build a life where she never had to worry. Food on the table, bills always paid, children cared for. But none of that was enough. Now she wanted an open marriage. A request dressed as a discussion, but it was already decided. She wasn't seeking permission, just trying to reframe a choice already made. I brought up our vows, hoping she'd show some sign of shame. She didn't blink. "It's just physical," she said, like 20 years of love and sacrifice could be dismissed like a casual hookup. We'd first met when I was 23 and working my second year at the mill. She was 21, had dropped out of college, working reception at a local clinic where I went after hurting my back. A few stitches and a couple dinners later, we were inseparable. Back then, she didn't hide behind manicured polish and performative grace. She was bright, real, full of laughter that made you feel lucky just to hear it. We got married 6 months later, a fast decision that raised eyebrows, especially from my parents. I didn't care. She made me feel seen. As a middle child in a noisy household with 4 brothers, I'd spent my life being overlooked. But with her, I finally mattered. Money was tight in those first years. We squeezed into a crumbling apartment, decorated with whatever we could find, cheap or free. The car stalled more than it drove. I picked up every extra shift I could while she slowly returned to school. We used to talk late into the night about someday, about kids and yards and a home that was really ours. When she got pregnant with James, our firstborn, I took on another job. Exhaustion became routine, but I didn't care. Watching her belly swell, painting the nursery together, those moments made the grind worth it. I'll never forget the way she looked at me in the delivery room, gripping my hand like a lifeline and whispering, "We made him. He's ours." 3 years later, Emily came along. I'd moved up to supervisor by then. Better pay, but the hours stretched even longer. Rebecca stayed home to raise the kids. We both agreed that's what we wanted. I told myself every missed dinner, every birthday I caught only the tail end of, was an investment in something permanent. Our life settled into a rhythm: work, dinner when I could make it, a story if I was lucky enough to catch bedtime, then sleep. Just enough energy left for a quick kiss before lights out. Rebecca seemed satisfied. She had her social circles, her Bible study, her book club, or so I thought, until the pattern shifted. Half a year ago, she began disappearing on Friday nights, claiming girls' nights out. After years of barely going anywhere, suddenly she was out every week. It didn't sit right. But I didn't want to jump to conclusions, not after everything we'd built. I believed history meant something. That was until I made a casual call to her best friend, Marie, just to check in. Rebecca was supposed to be with her. Marie hesitated, said they hadn't seen each other in weeks. My stomach dropped. I hung up, silent. That same night, Rebecca came home with her blouse askew and lipstick too fresh to be hours old. I didn't confront her. I paid attention. I took notes. I kept a log. Say what you want, obsessive, paranoid. But I wasn't going to confront her unless I was sure. Our anniversary was coming. I had a present in mind, not roses, not a vacation, something more symbolic. A message only someone done being lied to could give. I burned an entire overtime check on a custom pendant, a sleek necklace with a camera hidden inside. Took me weeks to find the right guy, a surveillance expert in the next town who didn't ask many questions. I handed over the cash and walked away with something better than closure: proof. When I gave it to her, she looked touched. She said she'd never take it off. And she didn't. She'd clasped the necklace with shining eyes and a smile that didn't quite reach her soul. "It's exactly right," she murmured, fastening the chain around her neck. "I'm never taking it off." That was one promise she managed to keep, even on her so-called girls' nights out. What broke me wasn't just the betrayal. It was the endless anticipation. Each Friday I watched in silence as she got ready. Dresses I didn't recognize, lipstick brighter than anything she ever wore for me, eyes framed with heavier makeup than usual. A sweet, overpowering scent clung to the air, something artificial and unfamiliar. It didn't belong to the woman I believed I had married. Then came the waiting. I'd pretend to be absorbed in whatever played on the screen, while my mind constructed scenes I didn't want to imagine. Who was she meeting? What did they do together? Did she look at someone else with the same intensity she once reserved for me? After each return, stumbling in, saturated with booze and sleep, I'd lie in bed, listening to her settle into unconsciousness. Only when her breathing slowed to that gentle rhythm of deep rest would I reach for the chain she still wore around her neck. She never remembered to take it off. Or maybe it had simply become part of her, forgotten yet constant. Inside the pendant was a concealed micro SD card. I'd remove it carefully, then head to our home office, the room we once used to plan vacations, organize school calendars, talk about the future, and plug it into my laptop, lit only by the dim glow of the screen. One by one, the videos revealed a version of my wife I didn't recognize. A mother, a wife of 20 years, now captured in grainy footage laughing far too hard at foolish jokes told by young men, disappearing into stalls, climbing into back seats, and renting dingy motel rooms. Before she entered those bars, she always slipped off her wedding ring. It would vanish into her purse like a truth buried deep. She became someone else entirely. No longer Mrs. Daniel Morgan, not a wife, not a mother, not a pillar of her church community. The first time I watched one of the recordings, I couldn't even finish it. I ended up hunched over the toilet, purging until there was nothing left to bring up. I thought about destroying it all, smashing the computer, torching the house, leaving without a word. But instead, I moved with precision. I copied the footage onto a secure external drive, scrubbed the browser history, and climbed back into bed, lying there in the dark, eyes open, until dawn broke. By the time I reached the 5th video, something inside me had frozen. I wasn't angry anymore. I was clinical, methodical. I began sorting the videos, each one labeled with a date, a place, the men involved. I built anonymous profiles, uploaded to obscure hosting platforms, created burner email accounts, and began studying legal grounds for divorce. Quietly, without leaving a digital trace, I hired an attorney and paid entirely in cash. After 10 videos, I had a complete plan. There would be no confrontation, no pleading, no breakdowns. I wouldn't ask for explanations or raise my voice. I wasn't going to destroy our home or beg for closure. I was just going to wait, let her make the next move, and when she did, I would already have every answer I needed. Until then, I carried on like nothing had changed. I clocked into work, came home on time, asked her how her day was, though I already knew the truth. I kissed her goodnight, even when she recoiled slightly. I called our children at college, played the role of proud father. Not once did I hint at the collapse unraveling behind the scenes. I became an actor in my own home, rehearsing my lines, waiting for the last scene. And when it finally came, when I sat across the kitchen table, steak knife in hand, pointing toward her, I asked in a voice stripped of emotion, "Did you honestly believe you could get away with this?" Her hand froze mid-motion. I caught the flicker of realization in her expression. Something had changed, but she had no idea how deeply. At that moment, I didn't see the woman I married. I saw a stranger standing in my kitchen, wearing a face I no longer trusted. I laid it all bare, the necklace, the hidden files, the footage I'd compiled, the segments stored in encrypted folders online. Each detail drained more color from her face, turning disbelief into horror, then finally into a silent, defeated calm. "You recorded me?" she whispered, fingertips brushing the necklace. "Not from the beginning," I said, keeping my voice steady. "Just since our anniversary. Just long enough to document 6 months of Friday nights spent with men I've never met, while I was working overtime to fund the life you kept insisting we deserved." "That's not fair," she began, but I didn't let her finish. "No?" I cut in. "Then go ahead. Explain. Tell me how sleeping with random men in public bathrooms is supposed to mean something else." Tears spilled over, streaking her cheeks with black lines of ruined mascara. As for me, I felt nothing. Not fury, not victory, not sadness. Just emptiness. I reached for the folder beside me and slid it across the table. Divorce paperwork. Her mask cracked then. The terms weren't generous. Minimal support, no access to my retirement funds, and a small slice of our shared assets. The alternative, of course, was worse. I had the footage, the files, and the audience, her friends, her relatives, her church group, waiting to see her unmasked. "You wouldn't do that," she said, her voice barely audible. We both knew better. She sat quietly, staring down at the papers before asking, "Why wait? Why not confront me right away?" I took a breath, thinking, was it just strategy? Or had I held on to the naive hope that I was wrong, that this was all some misinterpreted coincidence? That the woman I had loved for 20 years hadn't destroyed everything for fleeting moments of thrill? "I needed to be certain," I said, "and I needed to see who you really were." She looked at me differently then, not with remorse, but with a strange pity. "You never really knew me," she said softly. "I know enough," I replied. And I did. I remembered her laughter, the way she'd nervously twirl her hair, the graceful arch of her back in the mornings. But I also knew what she had done, and that alone told me everything I needed to know. I could still picture the way she cradled our infants the first time, the tears that always fell during over-the-top romantic movies, and how she could never get toast right. No matter how closely she watched, it always came out burnt. I'd once known every facet of her, her mannerisms, her laughter, the quiet way she showed affection. But somewhere along the way, she became a stranger. I understood everything about her, except why she'd changed. And maybe the reason didn't even matter in the end. The paperwork came through quickly. Rebecca didn't stall or put up a fight. She signed each form silently, eyes fixed on the table, never glancing at me or even acknowledging her own lawyer. The fire I remembered in her had gone out, What remained was someone simply hoping to exit with whatever pride she hadn't already lost. I called James and Emily home under the pretense of an emergency. Breaking the news in our old living room, the one where we'd celebrated holidays and built forts out of couch cushions, was the hardest thing I've ever done. "Your mom and I are ending our marriage," I told them plainly. "It's already moving forward." Their silence didn't surprise me. What followed was worse, the barrage of questions. Why? What went wrong? Can't you fix it? Did you try counseling? I had already decided not to tell them what I'd discovered about their mother, not for her sake, but for theirs. They didn't need to carry that burden. Let them remember the mom who kissed their scraped knees and lit candles on birthday cakes, not the woman from the files I'd uncovered. "Sometimes people grow apart," I said. "What you think you want when you're young isn't always what you end up needing." Emily, ever perceptive, locked eyes with me. "There's more, isn't there?" she asked. I held her gaze and gave a quiet nod. "There usually is," I said. The next day, Rebecca moved out. She packed a few outfits and personal effects. There was no argument over who got what. She didn't even touch the family photo albums or the heirloom china. She left while I was at work, her house key resting beside a short note on the kitchen counter. Just 2 words. "I'm sorry." 20 years, reduced to that. It felt hollow, insufficient. Some friends told me they'd seen her tending bar, at the same place she used to meet the men from those videos. Every now and then, I'd drive by and catch a glimpse of her through the glass, serving drinks to the same faces that once took her out back. There was something almost poetic in the reversal. 7 months after I'd given her the necklace, the final decree arrived. A judge's signature, a sheaf of legal jargon, and 2 decades of marriage were officially erased. I slipped the envelope into a drawer and took a long walk. I thought I might feel something, closure, sorrow, even rage, but there was only a heavy absence where our life together used to be. That evening, I deleted every single video, not because I forgave her, but because I didn't need them anymore. The damage had already been done. Keeping them felt like leaving a door open for her memory to haunt me. I kept just 1 copy, a backup drive locked away in a safe deposit box, just in case she ever tried to rewrite history. Eventually, I put the house up for sale. It was filled with too many ghosts. I bought a small place near the lake and took early retirement from the mill. My share of the settlement, combined with a lifetime of savings, was enough to support a quiet life. For the first time in years, I didn't have to wake up before dawn to check the alarm clock. At first, the solitude was jarring. No one asking how my day had been, no one to cook for or fall asleep beside. I threw myself into things I'd always put off, repairing old furniture, fishing in the early mornings, reading the books I'd long neglected. I called James and Emily often, making sure they knew the divorce hadn't changed how much I loved them. I slowly reconnected with people I'd drifted from during the marriage. Mike, a friend from high school, invited me out on a fishing weekend. Tony from work asked me to join his bowling league. Gradually, I began piecing together a life that was mine alone, no longer defined by being a husband or a provider. Half a year after the divorce was finalized, I enrolled in a community college cooking class just to fill the evenings. That's where I met Caroline. She was the instructor. Poised, patient, with a kind smile and a dry wit. 15 years younger than me, but our conversations flowed with surprising ease. She didn't flirt. She didn't try to impress me. She simply noticed things. How I struggled to dice onions. How proud I looked when I got the béarnaise sauce just right. We started staying late after class to clean up, talking as we worked. At first about food, then about our lives. She told me she'd once been married too. A brief union in her 20s that ended when her husband realized he couldn't commit. No kids, no baggage, just an experience filed away. She already knew I was divorced. Small towns don't keep secrets, but I didn't offer details. Some stories don't need to be told to be understood. Instead, we focused on what we were building together. Quiet, unspoken moments of comfort. Our first time alone wasn't planned as a date. We just ended up sharing a bottle of wine at her kitchen table, talking into the early hours. She never pried into my past, and I didn't volunteer. We found common ground in simple pleasures, trail walks, black and white films, terrible puns. A few months into this slow, easy connection, she invited me to spend a weekend at her lakeside cabin. It was a modest place, open layout, one bedroom, with tall windows overlooking the water. I brought ingredients for dinner, she brought wine. We spent the days cooking together, walking along wooded trails, and sharing pieces of our histories, neither of us trying to label what we were becoming. On Saturday night, we sat on the dock in silence, watching golden streaks of twilight stretch across the surface of the lake. The stillness wasn't heavy. It felt peaceful. When she slipped her hand into mine, that small gesture spoke volumes. It carried more intimacy than anything I'd felt in years. "I like this," she said quietly, her tone warm and unguarded. "Just being here with you feels right." I gently squeezed her fingers, my eyes following a heron as it rose above the still water. "Me too," I replied. That night, when she leaned in and kissed me, it felt like receiving something I'd long ago stopped believing I was allowed to want. I was 53, stepping into a chapter I hadn't planned for. She was 38, patient, gentle, and never once trying to rush the slow work of my healing. The next day, I made her breakfast: scrambled eggs, crispy strips of bacon, and French toast made just the way she'd taught me when we met during that cooking course. We ate together on her porch, watching the fog lift off the lake like breath in the morning air. "What exactly are we doing here?" I asked at last, voicing the question that had been quietly circling in my mind. She took a slow sip of her coffee, then answered, "I think we're finally learning how to live." Only yesterday, while the two of us sat at the edge of my dock, watching the last light of day stretch across the water, Caroline turned toward me with an expression more serious than usual. "Love, can we talk for a minute?" she asked. My chest tightened instinctively. Those words had once been the beginning of heartbreak. I braced myself without realizing it, but instead of pulling away, she smiled gently and entwined her fingers with mine. "I just want you to know how deeply I love you," she said, "and how much you mean to me." I let out a long breath I hadn't known I was still holding in. "Now, that's the kind of talk I'm happy to have," I said, giving her hand a firm squeeze. "I've come to understand that revenge doesn't always have to be about hurting someone back. Sometimes it's about clearing out the wreckage so something real and honest can grow from the ruins. If there's any regret I carry, it's only that it took me this long to realize I've always deserved something better. I still have that necklace, not the pendant with the hidden camera, which I shattered after copying the final recordings, but the chain itself. It's stored in a small box in the back of my closet. It doesn't represent Rebecca's betrayal anymore. It stands for what I lived through and came out stronger from. It reminds me that sometimes things must break to make room for something that can truly last. Just last week, I ran into Rebecca at the grocery store. She looked smaller somehow, her hair cropped short, her face etched with a year of hardship. Our eyes met near the fruit display. For a moment, I thought she might approach me, but instead, she offered a faint nod, somewhere between acknowledgement and unspoken apology, then turned and disappeared into another aisle. Strangely, I felt no triumph, no anger, no pride, just a quiet certainty that we had both ended up exactly where life intended. Later that night, as Caroline and I stood side by side in the kitchen preparing dinner, the same kitchen where my marriage had once unraveled, I told her about seeing Rebecca. "Do you ever wish things had played out differently?" she asked. "The way it all ended?" I stirred the pot of sauce, the one she'd patiently taught me to make from scratch, and thought for a moment. "I wish the ending hadn't been so painful," I said, "but I don't wish the relationship had continued." She nodded without pushing for more. She didn't need the whole backstory to understand the weight of what I'd survived, just as I didn't need every detail of her past to see her scars. What mattered was that we'd both made it through, and somehow found each other beyond all the wreckage. That night, with Caroline resting beside me, I lay awake, reflecting on how unlikely this path had been. How betrayal had turned into an unexpected path to freedom. How every closing door had held the beginnings of something new. And how the phrase, "we need to talk," once laced with dread, had transformed into a declaration of love. Life rarely ties itself up neatly. It twists and loops, stumbling through confusion and heartbreak before delivering you to where you're supposed to be. Revenge gave me a kind of closure. But Caroline? She gave me something much greater, a second chance to live with purpose. And this time, I won't let it slip through my fingers.